Hello everyone. Today I'm going to tell you some stories about cheating. The first story. The chandelier in the Grand Paris Hotel glittered, a cascade of diamonds reflecting in the polished marble floor. It was meant to be a romantic getaway, a rekindling of the flame that had flickered low between Eleanor and Charles. But the air tonight felt thick with a secret Eleanor carried like a lead weight in her chest. Charles, oblivious, beamed at her from across the impeccably set table. "Isn't this lovely, darling? Just like our honeymoon." Eleanor forced a smile, her gaze darting to the entrance. He wasn't coming. He wouldn't dare. And yet, a part of her was desperately hoping he would. He was Damien, Charles's stepbrother. Damien, with his sardonic wit and eyes that burned with a dangerous intelligence. Damien, who had arrived 2 days ago, ostensibly for a business meeting, but whose presence had sent a tremor through Eleanor's carefully constructed world. The affair had started innocently enough. Small talk over glasses of wine, late-night conversations on the terrace, a shared understanding of the unspoken anxieties that plagued both of them. Charles, bless his heart, was so focused on rebuilding his business after a recent setback, he hadn't noticed the quiet, insidious connection blossoming between his wife and his stepbrother. Then came the kiss. A stolen moment in the crowded hallway of the hotel, a flash of raw, undeniable passion that shattered the delicate facade of their polite interactions. And the guilt, oh, the guilt had been suffocating, but the guilt hadn't stopped them. This hotel, with its plush carpets and hushed discretion, had become their sanctuary. The stolen hours, the whispered words, the desperate encounters, all fueled by a potent mix of desire and regret. "Eleanor? Are you even listening?" Charles's voice pulled her back to the present. "Sorry, darling. Just admiring the view," she lied, her fingers twisting the stem of her wine glass. The view was of the gilded cage she had built for herself, a cage where she was both prisoner and jailer. Dinner stretched on, an agonizing parade of exquisite courses and polite conversation. Every glance at Charles felt like a betrayal. He was a good man, kind and generous, and he deserved better. But Eleanor was drowning in a tide of her own making. After dinner, Charles suggested a stroll along the Seine. Eleanor, desperate to escape the suffocating opulence of the hotel, readily agreed. The cool night air offered a temporary reprieve, but the city lights, reflecting in the dark water, only amplified the turmoil within her. As they walked, she felt a presence behind them. She didn't need to turn around. She knew it was Damien. He was a shadow, a constant reminder of her transgression. He stopped a few feet away, the glow of a street lamp illuminating his face. He looked at her, his eyes a dark, unreadable abyss. He didn't say a word, but his gaze burned through her, stripping away her composure, exposing the raw vulnerability she had tried so hard to conceal. Suddenly, Charles stopped and turned to Damien. "Damien. Fancy seeing you here. What brings you to this part of the city?" Damien's eyes flickered to Eleanor, then back to Charles. His voice, normally laced with sarcasm, was unusually subdued. "Just enjoying the night air. Thought I'd take a walk." The tension was palpable, thick enough to cut with a knife. Eleanor could barely breathe. Charles, ever the optimist, clapped Damien on the shoulder. "Join us. We were just taking a leisurely stroll." Damien hesitated, his gaze fixed on Eleanor's face. The unspoken plea in her eyes was undeniable. "Thank you, Charles," he said finally, his voice rough. "But I think I'll head back to the hotel. I have an early meeting tomorrow." He gave Eleanor one last, lingering look before turning and disappearing into the crowd. As he walked away, Eleanor felt a wave of nausea wash over her. The game was over. The charade had to end. Turning to Charles, she took a deep breath, her heart pounding in her chest. "Charles," she began, her voice trembling, "there's something I need to tell you." The lights of Paris blurred into a kaleidoscope of color. The Grand Paris Hotel, once a symbol of romance, now felt like a monument to her infidelity. As she prepared to confess, Eleanor knew that her life, and the lives of the two men she loved, would never be the same again. The glittering chandelier above seemed to mock her with its cold, impassive beauty, a silent observer to the devastating confession about to unfold. The weight in her chest had finally found its release, but the consequences, she knew, would be far heavier than she could ever imagine. The second story. The Spanish sun beat down on Amelia's neck, a relentless, fiery kiss that mirrored the guilt simmering within her. Barcelona was a kaleidoscope of vibrant colors, intoxicating smells, and the murmur of a foreign tongue, all designed to distract from a life that had become, in its own way, a dull, predictable monochrome. She and Mark had been married for 15 years. 15 years of comfortable silences, predictable routines, and the nagging feeling that they were more roommates than lovers. Mark, ever the pragmatic engineer, had booked this trip hoping it would rekindle something. Amelia had agreed, secretly hoping it would provide an escape, though she wasn't sure what she was escaping towards. That's where Javier came in. Their guide, a whirlwind of passionate pronouncements on Gaudi's genius and local legends, had an easy smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes and a voice that rolled like the Mediterranean waves. He was everything Mark wasn't: spontaneous, expressive, alive. From the moment he gripped her hand to help her navigate the narrow, winding streets of the Gothic Quarter, a forbidden current had crackled between them. It was a feeling Amelia hadn't experienced in what felt like a lifetime. She tried to ignore it. She really did. She focused on the Sagrada Familia's intricate facade, the bustling markets overflowing with ripe fruit, the taste of rich, dark chocolate melting on her tongue. But Javier was always there, a constant presence, his warm gaze lingering a fraction too long, his hand brushing against hers a little too often. It happened on the third day, after a wine tasting in the Priorat region. Mark, exhausted, had dozed off in the hotel. Javier had offered to show her a hidden gem, a tiny chapel perched atop a hill overlooking the vineyards. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, they stood in silence, the weight of unsaid words heavy in the air. He turned to her, his eyes filled with a vulnerability that mirrored her own. "Amelia," he breathed, his voice husky. She knew she should pull away. She knew the consequences. But the years of suppressed desire, the yearning for something more, surged within her, drowning out the voice of reason. One kiss led to another, and then another. The chapel offered no sanctuary, only the echo of her own reckless abandon. They found themselves tangled together, lost in a moment of forbidden passion, the guilt a distant hum overshadowed by the fierce, undeniable pull between them. The next few days were a blur of stolen glances and nervous smiles. Amelia felt like a fraud, torn between the thrill of her secret affair and the crushing weight of her betrayal. She avoided Mark's gaze, clinging to Javier's presence like a lifeline. the day of their departure arrived with a chilling inevitability. At the airport, as she hugged Javier goodbye, the reality of what she had done crashed down on her. His eyes held a question she couldn't answer, a promise she couldn't keep. Back home, the familiar setting of her life felt alien. The comfortable silences with Mark were now strained, filled with a tension she couldn't name. She found herself constantly replaying the moments with Javier, reliving the forbidden pleasure, the guilt gnawing at her conscience. One evening, weeks later, she finally broke down. She confessed everything to Mark, the words tumbling out in a torrent of tears and shame. His face, usually so placid, crumpled with a mixture of pain and disbelief. The ensuing weeks were a maelstrom of raw emotions: anger, hurt, confusion, and a profound sense of loss. Mark moved out. Their 15-year marriage, built on a foundation of comfort and routine, had crumbled in the face of Amelia's impulsive acte. In the aftermath, Amelia was left to sift through the wreckage of her life. She knew she had hurt Mark deeply, and she would carry that guilt forever. She also realized that her affair with Javier was a symptom of a deeper problem, a desperate attempt to fill a void within herself. The Spanish sun had illuminated not just the beauty of Barcelona, but also the cracks in her own existence. Now, she had to find a way to rebuild, to heal, and to face the consequences of her actions, alone, under a different kind of sun. Perhaps, in the ruins of her old life, she could finally find the courage to build a new one founded not on fleeting passion, but on honesty, self-awareness, and a genuine understanding of what she truly needed. The journey would be long and arduous, but for the first time in a long time, Amelia felt a flicker of hope, a fragile ember in the ashes of her past. The third story. The scent of wood smoke clung to Amelia like a second skin. It wasn't the comfortable, domestic aroma of their own hearth, but something wilder, sharper, tinged with the metallic tang of the forest. Thomas, her husband, wouldn't notice. He was too preoccupied with the harvest, his brow furrowed with the familiar anxiety that seemed to cling to him like the dust of the fields. Amelia had met Jasper, the hunter, at the edge of the woods a month ago. She'd been searching for lost berries, a simple escape from the monotony of her days. Jasper, with his lean, sun-weathered face and eyes the color of moss, had been cleaning his rifle. He'd offered her a share of his venison stew, and over the crackling fire, a connection had sparked, a wild, untamed thing that resonated deep within her. Thomas was a good man, a hard-working man. He provided for her, loved her in his own quiet, predictable way. But his love was a steady flame, comforting and warming, but never exhilarating. Jasper was a bonfire, unpredictable and dangerous, pulling her in with a force she couldn't resist. The affair was a slow, agonizing burn. Stolen moments in the woods, hushed whispers under the rustling canopy, the illicit thrill of his touch. Each encounter left Amelia raw with guilt and a desperate, addictive craving for more. She saw the worry etched on Thomas's face, the unspoken question in his eyes, but she couldn't stop herself. One evening, as the sun bled into the horizon, she met Jasper at their usual clearing. The air was thick with unspoken words. "I can't," she finally said, her voice trembling. "I can't do this anymore." Jasper's face hardened. "Can't or won't?" "Both." The lie tasted bitter on her tongue. "Thomas, he deserves better." "Deserves better than a woman who's come alive in my arms?" His voice was low and dangerous. He reached out, his fingers brushing against her cheek. The familiar heat flared within her. She recoiled. "It's not right, Jasper. It's not honorable." He laughed, a harsh, hollow sound. "Honorable? You think Thomas is honorable, blind as he is to the woman he shares his bed with?" His words stung with a brutal truth. Thomas was oblivious, lost in the rhythm of his life, unaware of the storm raging within her. But that didn't excuse her betrayal. "I'm going home," she said, turning away. "You'll be back," Jasper said, his voice laced with unsettling certainty. "You're addicted to the wild and me, Amelia. You can't deny it." Days turned into weeks. Amelia threw herself into her chores, trying to drown out the memory of Jasper in the mundane realities of her life. She cooked Thomas's meals, mended his clothes, and tried to rekindle the lost spark in their marriage, but the woods called to her. The scent of wood smoke, the rustling leaves, the echoing call of the birds, they all whispered Jasper's name. Sleeping beside Thomas felt like a betrayal, a double betrayal. One cold, blustery afternoon, Thomas came home early, his face grim. "They found a body in the woods," he said, his voice tight. "A hunter. Found him near Widow's Creek. Some kind of accident, they're saying. A fall." Amelia's heart lurched. She couldn't breathe. Widow's Creek. Their meeting place. Thomas looked at her, his eyes filled with concern. "You look pale, Amelia. Are you all right?" She forced a smile, a lie that choked her. "Just a little cold." That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the image of Jasper's lifeless body haunting her. Had it been an accident? Or something more sinister? Had someone discovered their affair? And if so, who? The next morning, she went to the woods. She found the clearing empty, the only sign of Jasper, his discarded hunting knife, lying on the damp earth. A wave of grief washed over her, so intense it nearly buckled her knees. As she picked up the knife, she noticed something else, a single, crimson berry, lying beside it. A wild strawberry, the kind she had been searching for the day she met Jasper. But it was out of season. Impossible. A cold dread settled in her gut. She looked up, scanning the surrounding trees, a chilling realization dawning. Jasper hadn't been the only one who knew about their affair. Someone else had been watching. And now, someone else knew her secret. The comforting silence of the woods had transformed into a menacing presence. The wildness she had craved had turned on her, trapping her in a web of deceit and suspicion. Thomas remained oblivious, and Amelia was left alone, haunted by the ghost of a hunter and the chilling knowledge that her secret was no longer hers to keep. She had traded the monotony of her life for a dangerous game, and now she was paying the price, a price that might cost her everything. The fourth story. The air in the Oaxaca market hung thick with the scent of roasting chiles and sweet pan dulce. Elena loved this chaos, the vibrant colors of the textiles, the boisterous calls of vendors hawking their wares. It grounded her, reminded her of her roots. Beside her, Mark, her husband of 10 years, navigated the crowd with a detached air, his eyes fixed on his phone. They had come to Oaxaca for Elena's mother's 70th birthday. Mark had initially been enthusiastic, promising to immerse himself in the culture, learn some Spanish. But since arriving, he'd been distant, preoccupied. He blamed jet lag, the unfamiliar food, anything but the truth Elena suspected lurked beneath the surface. One evening, while Elena helped her mother prepare for the fiesta, Mark announced he was going for a walk to clear his head. He returned hours later, the faint scent of tequila clinging to his clothes, a nervous energy radiating from him. Elena tried to brush it off, attributing it to the unfamiliar environment, the stress of travel. But the seed of doubt had been planted. The doubt blossomed into a full-blown, thorny vine the following day at a small, family-run mezcal distillery. As the guide explained the intricate process of agave harvesting and fermentation, Elena noticed Mark's gaze fixated on a woman working behind the counter. Her name was Isabella. She was striking, with sun-kissed skin, a cascade of dark hair, and eyes that sparkled with an undeniable warmth. Elena watched as Isabella, effortlessly switching between Spanish and accented English, explained the various mezcal varieties to Mark. He listened intently, a genuine smile playing on his lips, a smile Elena hadn't seen in months. Elena tried to engage, to pull Mark back into their shared reality. But he remained captivated by Isabella, buying her a small bag of artisan chocolates from the stand. Later, over a shared tasting of aged mezcal, Elena excused herself to use the restroom. When she returned, she saw Mark and Isabella standing close, their heads bent together, their voices hushed. She couldn't hear what they were saying, but the electricity between them was palpable. The rest of the trip was a torturous dance of denial and suspicion. Elena tried to recapture the spark they once shared, but Mark remained emotionally unavailable, his attention flitting back to Isabella like a moth to a flame. He made excuses to visit the distillery again, claiming he wanted to learn more about the mezcal-making process. Elena pretended to believe him, her heart aching with a dull, persistent pain. Back home, the distance between them grew wider. Mark was withdrawn, irritable. He worked late, often coming home smelling faintly of perfume that wasn't Elena's. Finally, one rainy Tuesday evening, Elena confronted him. "Who is she, Mark?" she asked, her voice trembling that he denied it at first, stammering about work stress, about her being paranoid. But Elena pressed him, her voice growing stronger, fueled by weeks of suppressed hurt. Finally, the dam broke. He confessed. He told her about Isabella, about the connection he felt, the way she made him feel alive again. He said it was a mistake, a moment of weakness, that he regretted it. But the words felt hollow, rehearsed. Elena listened, numb. The life they had built together, the promises they had made, crumbled around her like ancient ruins. The vibrant colors of Oaxaca, once a symbol of her heritage, now a haunting reminder of his betrayal. In the end, there was nothing left to say. Elena asked him to leave. As he packed his bags, she watched him, her heart heavy with a complex mix of anger, sadness, and a strange sense of liberation. The future stretched before her, uncertain and daunting. But as she stood there, in the empty apartment, she knew one thing: she would rebuild her life, brick by brick, on a foundation of truth and self-respect. She would reclaim her joy, her passion, and her vibrant spirit, proving to herself that betrayal, while painful, wouldn't define her. The vibrant colors of Oaxaca, she decided, would one day represent not a betrayal, but a rebirth. And she would learn to love mezcal again, for the strength it represented, the fiery spirit that burned away the old and welcomed the new. The fifth story. The scent of lilac clung to Sarah, a phantom limb of happier days. It was the perfume she'd worn on their first date, the same scent that now mocked her from the half-empty bottle on her vanity. Downstairs, the familiar cacophony of children's laughter and bathwater splashes filtered through the floorboards. Her laughter, once a part of that symphony, felt caught in her throat, a strangled bird beating against her ribs. Mark, her husband, was downstairs too, ostensibly supervising the children. But Sarah wasn't fooled. She knew where his gaze lingered, felt the phantom warmth of his hand on skin that wasn't hers. The babysitter, Lily. Barely out of high school, with a sunshine smile and eyes that held a dangerous, intoxicating innocence, Sarah had initially been charmed by Lily's youthful energy. The kids adored her, and Sarah, juggling a demanding career and the everyday chaos of family life, had been grateful for the help. Now, that gratitude tasted like ash in her mouth. The subtle signs had accumulated like sediment in a riverbed, eroding her trust, poisoning her peace. A lingering hug by the door. A shared joke that landed just a beat too long. The way Mark's eyes followed Lily as she moved around the house, a silent, hungry admiration that she tried to dismiss them, to chalk it up to exhaustion and insecurity. But last night, the whisper of voices carried up the stairs, a stolen moment near the back patio. A hand brushing a cheek, a murmured goodnight that held the weight of unspoken desire. Today, the truth hung heavy in the air, thick and suffocating. She couldn't pretend any longer. Taking a deep breath, Sarah descended the stairs. The scene that greeted her was almost banal. Lily, in her usual spot on the floor, was reading to 8-year-old Ethan and 6-year-old Maya. Mark was chopping vegetables at the kitchen island, his back to her. "How's bath time going?" Sarah asked, her voice betraying none of the turmoil churning within. "All good, Mom," Ethan chirped, snuggling closer to Lily. Maya, oblivious to the tension in the air, giggled at the story. Lily looked up, her bright eyes meeting Sarah's. There was a flicker of something in them, guilt? Triumph? Sarah couldn't decipher it. Mark turned around, a smile stretching across his face. A smile that suddenly felt foreign, a mask he wore for her benefit. "Just about done. Lily's been a huge help, as always." Sarah felt a wave of nausea. He was praising Lily, right in front of her, as if nothing had happened. As if he hadn't shattered their marriage into a million irreparable pieces. "Lily," Sarah said, her voice surprisingly steady, "could I have a word with you in the living room?" The children looked up, sensing the shift in tone. Mark's smile faltered. Lily, her cheeks flushing a pale pink, closed the book. In the living room, Sarah didn't waste time with pleasantries. "I know," she said, her voice low and laced with steel. "I know about you and Mark." Lily's eyes widened, and the last vestiges of innocence vanished. "Sarah, I don't," Sarah cut her off. "Don't insult me with excuses. Just tell me why. Why would you do this? To me? To my children?" Lily's voice was barely a whisper. "I didn't mean for it to happen. He was lonely." Lonely? The word echoed in Sarah's mind, a hollow mockery. She had worked tirelessly, sacrificed her own ambitions to build a life, a family with Mark. And he was lonely? "Get out," Sarah said, her voice trembling. "Leave. And don't ever come back." Lily didn't argue. She grabbed her bag, tears welling in her eyes, and slipped out the front door. Sarah stood there, alone in her living room, the silence amplifying the deafening roar of her pain. The children were still in the kitchen, oblivious to the hurricane that had just ripped through their lives. She had to tell Mark. Not tomorrow, not next week, but now. He needed to know that the charade was over, that the trust was gone. But as she turned to face him, a new, chilling thought crept into her mind. Was she even sure she wanted to fix this? Could she ever truly forgive him? The scent of lilac, once a symbol of love and new beginnings, now hung heavy in the air, a constant reminder of the betrayal that had poisoned her life. The sweet fragrance had become a bitter, suffocating shroud. And Sarah knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, that her life would never be the same again.